I remember hearing stories about witches. Is it true what they say?
Alright, so the trailer just came out for the Netflix series based off of Sapkowski's series of books called The Witcher. But if you're watching this video, there's a high chance you are a bit more experienced with CD Projekt Red's video game.
What are you doing? Killing monsters.
As much as I love the cockiness of Sapkowski, I can't help but feel like the push for the television series grew from the popularity of CDPR's addition to the franchise.
Została wcześniej napisana przez obecnego Sapkowskiego, który różnych sobie, jak Państwo doskonale wiedzą, nie ma.
And this is coming from someone who likes the books more than the games. And CDPR wrapped a nice little bow on things that were otherwise left out of the books. With that being said, I didn't really enjoy the games until I read the books. And if you're like me and you couldn't get into the games, I highly suggest reading the books before reattempting to slog through it. Scenarios in the game feel much more important when you're familiar with the source material. Felipe Earhart is more important, Dijkstra is more important, the Lodge is more important, the assassinations of certain kings have much more of an impact when you have more knowledge on King Foltest or Demavend. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Fuck you.
Eredin, who is basically the Night King before the Night King, is a great example of this. He doesn't say too much in the game, but he really didn't need to if you've read the books. To be honest, he was really an unfinished subplot that didn't actually go anywhere. Imagine if the White Walkers never came at the end of GOT. I mean, that technically happened. But that's not what I mean. Eredin was a mysterious character who appeared throughout the books as a ghost or apparition. He usually appeared to chase Ciri at random, inopportune moments. But this subplot doesn't really end in the books. Just imagine throughout the entire series of Game of Thrones, the White Walkers go around talking about killing all humans and taking over Westeros. And then one day they just stop. And they never showed up. And even after that, Sapkowski has the gall to tell us that he isn't making another sequel to the franchise.
Fuck you.
But hey, it's his book series, so who am I to say the message Sapkowski intended? Maybe it wasn't his point to make Eredin seem important, and the games influenced this as I personally read it. Thankfully, CDPR added an ending that explained what happened to Eredin and his awesome chase through time and space to find Ciri during the events of Lady in the Lake. Now CDPR are about to do the same for a tabletop adventure that was called Cyberpunk 2020. It's an obscure 1980s game that, including myself, nobody has really ever heard of until CDPR announced this release. And you can bet your buttocks that I'm gonna talk about all this awesomeness. I may even run a Cyberpunk 2020 game on this channel and record the entire thing leading up to the release of 2077. Oh yeah. It'd be like a fun, giant celebration. But my point is, the video game is really what brought more attention to the Witcher books. And what I feel made the game so great were the additions it made to the books. So if Netflix wants to capitalize off of this sudden popularity and release what could potentially be, or at least what people say, the next Game of Thrones, I feel like it should do the same thing. Stay true to the source material, but expand upon what the books have created. You see, the books have a world that is very fantastic and well thought out, but the narrative really just focuses on the Witcher's point of view. Occasionally you'll have some interesting scenes of kings talking about impending war or interesting politics referring to fake princesses. But in general, it's a book more akin to Lord of the Rings than GOT. It's a more focused story rather than a multitude of complex characters. But of course, almost everything high fantasy is based off of J.R.R. Tolkien's masterpiece. But that is kind of what made GOT stand out from the rest. It took elements of high fantasy and subverted expectations in a satisfying and realistic way. With The Witcher, we have a series that absolutely follows the tropes and linear stories that Tolkien established. However, the world of The Witcher and Lord of the Rings have the potential to be like Game of Thrones, as long as its producers take the liberty of expanding upon its world. During an early interview of the Netflix series, the producer said they wanted to stay true to the books, and I really hope that doesn't mean doing the books exactly. You see, a narrative like Lord of the Rings works as a film. You have a bad guy who is off doing his own thing, a group of adventurers teaming up to achieve a goal. They run into hardships and they achieve the goal and beat the bad guy. This is usually done in a 3-act structure: setup, confrontation, and resolution. If you're writing a TV show, you shouldn't follow this structure as much. With multiple seasons, you bet your buns you'll have more than 3 acts. Don't let the amount of Witcher books fool you. It's still set up in a 3-act structure. The two initial books are short stories, but Blood of Elves is what really starts the plot. Blood of Elves and Time of Contempt are the introduction. Baptism of Fire and the Tower of Swallow are the midpoint, and it really focuses on the adventure itself. The Lady of the Lake is obviously the conclusion. So if you're gonna make a TV show for The Witcher, and you are making this medium something that follows the books, which is, unlike Game of Thrones, written as a 3-act structure, make additions to the narrative. And for this concept, I have a great example. Now before I start, this could potentially be a hard spoiler if they do it correctly. There is a character in the book named Princess Renfrey, and she has a very interesting storyline. Princess Renfrey is a child born under what is called the Black Sun, which is another interesting subplot that should be expanded upon, but I digress. Basically, being born under the Black Sun meant bad juju, that a female child born under this time were naturally cruel at heart. Wizards hunted down these girls and killed them to perform autopsies, but in the world of The Witcher, this was most likely just an excuse for wizards to perform fucked up experiments. But for Princess Renfrey, due to being born under royalty, she was safe from the wizards. However, Renfrey's father, the king, decided to marry a new wife. This wife proclaimed that Renfrey was plotting to kill her. The new wife hired a thug to kill her and bring back her heart and liver. Instead, because this is high fantasy, the thug mugged and raped Renfrey. While he was occupied, Renfrey managed to kill the thug and fled into the wilds, forcing her to a life of thievery and selling herself for food and shelter. Over the years, she gained a bad reputation, essentially becoming a bandit leader that you didn't want to mess with. After this, a lot of interesting things occur. An event involving gnomes, she has a prince that falls in love with her, and a very intriguing storyline with his family, the hunt for a wizard that stalked her in the past, then finally a run-in with Gerald, where she, in conclusion, gets slaughtered by him. But you see, here's the point that I'm getting here. This entire interesting plotline and character arc is a story that doesn't actually happen in the books. It's just a plot that is explained to Gerald through dialogue rather than something the reader actually experiences. It's part of a short story that takes place in a town called Blaviken. If you played the Witcher video games, Renfrey's storyline is why Gerald is called the Butcher of Blaviken. So imagine, if the Netflix series shows us this story, instead of following the story straight from the books, have the viewers experience her life. As a book reader, imagine how much enjoyment you would get from hearing people talk about how much they love Renfrey as a character. I'm sure it would be the same as how GOT readers felt about Robb Stark. Imagine Queen Calanth being expanded upon as the Queen of Cintra. This statement isn't just coming out from being a fan of the books, it's also just business common sense. If you really want people to get into The Witcher in a post-Game of Thrones world, it would be smart to write the TV show as a TV show and not the narrative of the books. After watching this trailer, I'm a bit worried about how all of this will go down. I'm already seeing things from certain books that would imply that they might be blowing the load a bit too quickly. But before I talk about this, I want to give my first impressions of the trailer. It looks a bit better than I thought it would in terms of quality, but I'm not too big of a fan of Henry Cavill. I always saw Gerald as a serious but lovable man. You could probably say I had a small man crush on him as I read through the books and played the games. Henry Cavill comes off as a model for me. He visually looks like a man who lives in a world of glamour and working out. I personally wanted someone like Nikolaj Coster-Waldau, I hope I said that right.
Fuck you.
The man who played as Jaime Lannister to play Gerald. Even though he's also a very good looking man who looks like he probably works out. His acting as Jaime felt very genuine, and I can picture him as Gerald. Of course, Henry's credentials aren't the best. It could have just been bad directing and writing. And maybe since Gerald is more of a distant character, having the actor act like this would fit him. But deep in my heart, he will always be that lovable, selfish bastard with a great character arc. But back to the trailer. The most interesting aspects were the Yennefer scenes. We never really go into Yennefer's backstory in the books. Seeing this is what makes me a bit more excited about the entire idea of a TV show. In the books, being a sorceress was rather a depressing fact. We learned that becoming a sorceress usually meant that you were too ugly or special-minded to find a husband. So the family would send girls to become sorcerers. Over time, they would make themselves pretty via magic. Seeing what I assume is Tissaia taking Yennefer in and teaching her the ways would be an extremely interesting and satisfying experience for the book readers. Ciri seems a bit older than she would be, which kind of bothers me. I also see what should be dreams. the desert from the Time of Contempt, an icy looking area that looks like it might be the end of Tower of Swallows. We see her with dryads in the Brokilon Forest, which would be a sort of Destiny reference or scene. And I assume they thought making them green would be cheesy. We see what could be a story from The Last Wish, and what I assume is Mousesack talking to Geralt. But here are the things that worry me. Nilfgaard is here. No! They should not, in my opinion, they should not have Nilfgaard come in the first season. Hopefully this is the end of the first season. However, this may not be the case because they have this scene.
Find Geralt of Rivia.
This is what I assume is Calanth dying and telling her to find Geralt. If this takes place at the end of the first season, then why spoil Calanth in this position? But again, as great as the books are, I really hope they make some additions. I feel like there may not be enough of a satisfying narrative to span over multiple seasons. But again, this is all just my opinion, you know. Maybe it'd be a great show if it really tries its best to be something totally different from Game of Thrones, which is also fine. I myself would love for the intro to be a scene with Eredin walking up on someone and talking about how they're gonna destroy and enslave all the humans, even though that's almost the same exact thing that kind of happens at the beginning of Game of Thrones. But god damn it, we want zombie polar bears.
Fuck you. God damn it, we want a zombie polar bear.